Something to learn from Miri. The renowned Sufi sage Baba Saifdar had a disciple named Miri, who used to complain that Saifdar hardly ever saw him after he had been admitted into discipleship. "I was better off before he made me a pupil," he would say, "because then I was treated at least as a friend and could benefit from his companionship." Baba Saifdar, however, knew the inner condition of his student, but made no reference to it on their rare meetings. He preferred to await the chance to provide an effective demonstration of the relationship and its meaning. One day, Miri was giving evidence at an open-air court when Baba Saifdar passed. The judge had just said to the witness, "Do you positively remember having seen the accused at the robbery?" Miri, catching sight of his teacher and recalling as a consequence only the remembering exercise which he had learnt from him, called out involuntarily, "I remember!" The alleged thief was immediately convicted on this eyewitness statement. He was innocent, and when Miri retracted his identification, he was nearly tried for perjury. When he was eventually released, the Baba said to him, "That was a parallel in ordinary matters with what can happen in more profound affairs. Praise and complaint of one's teachers leads to folly. So does any disregard for their rules. What is visible to them is invisible to the student. I can only hope that my example may be of value to others, so that far from having inevitably to go through this sort of experience, they may be enabled to proceed to higher things," said Miri. This story is for that reason called Miri's Lesson. The Mad King's Idol. There was once a violent, ignorant, and idolatrous king. One day he swore that if his personal idol accorded him a certain advantage in life, he would capture the first 3 people who passed by his castle and force them to dedicate themselves to idol worship. Sure enough, the king's wish was fulfilled, and he immediately sent soldiers onto the highway to bring in the first 3 people whom they could find. These 3 were, as it happened, a scholar, a Sayyid, a descendant of Muhammad the Prophet, and a prostitute. Having thrown them down before his idol, the unbalanced king told them of his vow and ordered them all to bow down in front of the image. The scholar said, "This situation undoubtedly comes within the doctrine of force majeure. There are numerous precedents allowing anyone to appear to conform with custom if compelled, without real legal or moral culpability being in any way involved." So he made a deep obeisance to the idol. The Sayyid, when it was his turn, said, "As a specially protected person, having in my veins the blood of the Holy Prophet, my actions themselves purify anything which is done, and therefore there is no bar to my acting as this man demands." And he bowed down before the idol. The prostitute said, "Alas, I have neither intellectual training nor special prerogatives, so I am afraid that whatever you do to me, I cannot worship this idol even in appearance." The Mad King's malady was immediately banished by this remark. As if by magic he saw the deceit of the 2 worshippers of the image. He at once had the scholar and the Sayyid decapitated, and set the prostitute free. Two sides. Part-coloured dervish robes, since copied for teaching purposes and eventually imitated for sheer decoration, were introduced into Spain in the Middle Ages in this manner. A Frankish king had a taste for pageantry, and he also prided himself on his grasp of philosophy. He asked a Sufi known as the Agarin to instruct him in the high wisdom. The Agarin said, "We offer you observation and reflection, but first you must learn their extension." "We already know how to extend our attention, having studied well all the preliminary steps to wisdom from our own tradition," said the king. "Very well," said the Agarin. "We shall give your majesty a demonstration of our teaching at a pageant tomorrow." Arrangements were duly made, and the next day the dervishes of the Agarin's ribat, or teaching centre, filed through the narrow streets of that Andalusian town. The king and his courtiers were assembled on either side of the route, grandees on the right and men-at-arms on the left. When the procession was over, the Agarin turned to the king and said, "Majesty, please ask your knights, from opposite, the colours of the dervish robes." The knights all swore on the scriptures and upon their honour that the costumes had been blue. The king and the rest of the court were amazed and confused, for this was not what they had seen at all. "We all distinctly saw that they were dressed in brown habits," said the king, "and among us are men of great sanctity and faith and well respected." He ordered all his knights to be prepared for punishment and degradation. Those who saw the clothes as brown were sent to one side to be rewarded. These proceedings lasted for some time. Afterwards the king said to the Agarin, "What bewitchment have you performed, evil man? What devilment is this which can cause the most honourable knights in Christendom to defy truth, abandon their hope of redemption, and betray indications of unreliability which render them useless for battle?" The Sufi said, "The half of the robes visible on your side was brown. The other half of each robe was blue. Without preparation, your expectancy causes you to deceive yourself about us. How can we teach anyone anything under such circumstances?" Welcomes. We welcome the scholars who want to understand the path. What of the others? They think that we do not welcome them, but it is in reality they who do not welcome us. They cannot do so while they retain such strange conceptions of the way. I refer to two kinds: those who say, "We deny the value of Sufism," and those who say, "We accept Sufism, but this is not it." Of the two, those who reject the Sufis are better than those who pretend that the people whom they do not like cannot therefore be Sufis. The former class are deluded by others into believing that Sufis are useless, and anyone may be deceived by others. And the latter class are those who are deluded by themselves into imagining something which is not correct. No scholar can decide who is or who is not a Sufi. People trying to do something of which they are incapable should always be a lesson to us. Ajmal Hussein and the Scholars. Sufi Ajmal Hussein was constantly being criticized by scholars, who feared that his repute might outshine their own. They spared no efforts to cast doubts upon his knowledge, to accuse him of taking refuge from their criticisms in mysticism, and even to imply that he had been guilty of discreditable practices. At length he said, "If I answer my critics, they make it the opportunity to bring fresh accusation against me, which people believe because it amuses them to believe such things. If I do not answer them, they crow and preen themselves, and people believe that they are real scholars. They imagine that we Sufis oppose scholarship. We do not, but our very existence is a threat to the pretended scholarship of tiny, noisy ones. Scholarship long since disappeared. What we have to face now is sham scholarship." The scholars shrilled more loudly than ever. At last Ajmal said, "Argument is not as effective as demonstration. I shall give you an insight into what these people are like. He invited question papers from the scholars to allow them to test his knowledge and ideas. 50 different professors and academicians sent questionnaires to him. Ajmal answered them all differently. When the scholars met to discuss these papers at a conference, there were so many versions of what he believed that each one thought that he had exposed Ajmal and refused to give up his thesis in favor of any other. The result was the celebrated brawling of the scholars. For 5 days they attacked each other bitterly. This, said Ajmal, is a demonstration. What matters to each one most is his own opinion and his own interpretation. They care nothing for truth. This is what they do with everyone's teachings. When he is alive, they torment him. When he dies, they become experts on his works. The real motive of the activity, however, is to vie with one another and to oppose anyone outside their own ranks. Do you want to become one of them? Make a choice soon. Timur and Hafiz. The Sufi poet Hafiz of Shiraz wrote the famous poem, "If that Shirazi Turkish maid would take my heart into her hand, I'd give Bokhara for the mole upon her cheek, or Samarkand." The conqueror Tamerlane had Hafiz brought before him and said, "How can you give away Bokhara and Samarkand for a woman? Besides, they are in my own domains, and I shall not permit anyone to pretend that they are not." Hafiz said to him, "Your meanness may have given you power. My generosity has put me in your power. Your meanness is obviously more effective than my prodigality." Tamerlane laughed and let the Sufi go.